The federal government has set a 2023 deadline to stop the importation of petrol into the country. That, according to the Group Managing Director of the NNPC, Melekyari, while signing the Condensate Refinery Strategy Program, Front-End Engineering Design. The strategy is expected to deliver 20 million litres of petrol on completion. Nigeria is one of the highest importers of petrol in the world, a concern the President Muhammad Buhari insists must be addressed. But what does this mean to Africa's largest economy? Will the government succeed in its quest, having attempted to do same in 2017 in an effort that fell short of expectations? Data feeds are coming through in one place simultaneously on all our social media platforms, on channelstv.com and on youtube.com/channelsweb. You can follow us right now on Facebook as well. We've got all our platforms on social media covered. Be part of the show. Tweet at Gimba Umar CTV. Use the hashtag State of the Nation. Let's get your thoughts in. It's a big story. The Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Abubakar Malami, has ordered the Department of State Services, the DSS, to hands off the trial of Omoyele Sowore, convener of the hashtag Revolution Now protest, who is being accused of treason. In a statement, Mr. Gwandu said that the order is part of deliberations and deliberate efforts to probe emergent issues related to the recent situation in Sowore's case and for speedy dispensation of justice. The Senate already calls for investigation of those who invaded the courts to arrest Sowore and prosecute them appropriately. Why did the DSS act in that manner? Whose orders were being carried out at the time? It's prime time here in Lagos, and this is State of the Nation. Welcome everyone in Nigeria and the rest of the world. I am Gimba Umar, and this is State of the Nation. It's a big story in the country, one that is generating reactions from the tiers of government, with legislators, the executive and the judiciary. One man being charged with treason, Omoyele Sowore, was rearrested in court barely 24 hours after he was released on the order of a federal high court in Abuja, who had given the DSS 24 hours. Back then, that was the ultimatum to release Mr. Sowore and Mr. Bakare, who is his co-accused. Now, the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Abubakar Malami, has ordered the Department of State Services, the DSS, to hands off the trial of Omoyele Sowore and forward the case file to his office. Let's analyze that situation further as we look at the beneficiaries and who will be blamed in this instance. I'm now being joined on State of the Nation by Mr. Quakers. He's the Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Norris and Quakers, as a matter of fact. I want to thank you so much indeed for joining us. He joins us via Skype. And from our Abuja studios as well, we also have Isaac Anumudu, a lawyer. He joins us from our Abuja studios. Many thanks indeed for joining us, gentlemen. Now, let me come to you first, Mr. Quakers. Why has it become important for the AGF to wade into this treason case, asking the DSS to back off in what's turning out to be a quite historical case?
Well, first and foremost, let me start by saying that it is not a question of why is it increasingly becoming important for the AGF to step in and take over the matter. Now, incidentally, by the provisions of Section 174 of the 1999 Constitution, the AGF is the Chief Law Officer of the Federation, vested with the power to prosecute. Now, if you recall, this same charge was actually filed from his office and firmed out to one Dr. Hassan Liman, a senior advocate of Nigeria, who is in private. Now, because in court and the general outburst and outcry and condemnation of the DSS operatives who invaded the courtroom in effecting the arrest of the defendant, that's in the person of Sowore. Clearly, what that means is that the government is embarrassed, and the AGF, as the Chief Law Officer of the Federation, vested with constitutional powers, has the power to take over, because Constitution is very clear on that as regards his powers. He has the power to take over and discontinue any case that is filed in the name of the federal government. And that's the essence of that constitutional provision. So what he has done is to merely exercise the constitutional powers vested in him. And I don't want to read a political undertone to it, but to simply say that legally he is empowered to do what he did.
Interesting, but let me get your views as well in our Abuja studios, Mr. Anumudu. What's the implication on this DSS and Sowore case, Sowore himself being part of this very troubling situation that we're seeing in our judicial spheres today? The AGF will be handling this case. What do you make of it?
Yeah, first of all, it is commendable that the AGF has acted in a very responsible manner, quickly in recalling and taking over the case file from the DSS or from the senior lawyer who's been handling the matter. What happened in court last Friday was a national embarrassment, not just to the judiciary, but to the entire country. And it is one that I expect every of the three arms of government to rise up in unison, not only to condemn, to investigate, to specifically isolate and fish out whoever was behind that misadventure, that sacrilege that occurred in the Temple of Justice, and deal very decisively with it. So what we see the Honorable Attorney General of the Federation doing is like beginning the process from the executive arm to say, wait a minute, we're embarrassed by this. We want to retrace our steps. We want to withdraw this case file, even look at it in the first place. First of all, the commendable aspect of it is that we lawyers, from our experiences, it's not always even very good for the same person who investigates, who is the complainant, the investigator, to also be the prosecutor. In this particular case, the DSS has not only sought to be the complainer in arresting Sowore, investigator in detaining and in detaining him, but upon charging him to court, they were the prosecutor, and in fact now insisted on being the judge, such that when the judge granted him bail, they refused to comply with the order, such that the judge was so provoked to direct and give an ultimatum of 24 hours. That was not necessary before the DSS will obey court order. And when they now sought to comply, they simply rearrested him the very next day, showing total disdain, total disrespect for the judicial arm. So it's a very serious matter, which I expect all the three arms to deal with. I'm happy that the House of Reps is calling for investigation. The Senate is calling for investigation. The Board of Benchers are already speaking. I expect the NGSC to sit urgently on this matter and take very decisive action. But the matter should not just go beyond recalling case file, which the Attorney General has powers to do, like my learned senior colleague Norris Nkweka has just said, under Section 174 of the Constitution. He has powers to, call for the case file, look into it, and might even decide to terminate the matter if he feels there's no merit in it. But that's not the issue here. The issue is that the Temple of Justice has been desecrated. And let me tell you the implication here. It is the judiciary among the three arms of government that plays the role similar to that of God. You don't defy God and go scot-free. It is that arm that judges between government and individuals, government and other agencies. Even between the legislature and the executive and the judiciary, if they have cases, it still goes back to the same court that has the final say. That's why when the Supreme Court gives a judgment, even if you don't like it, the only thing you do is to appeal to God. You can't do nothing after that. So for someone to come to the presence of the judiciary, to the court premises, not just court premises, to the courtroom, to seek to abduct somebody appearing before a court of law is the height. That is the height of disrespect
let me come in here and ask your senior colleague,
DSS,
yes. Mr. Quakers, via Skype. Mr. Quakers, on the one hand, the AGF has asked for the files of the treason charges on Sowore be sent to his office in a deliberate effort, we understand, to probe emerging issues related to the recent situation in Sowore's case. For speedy dispensation, he wants that to happen. But then the question is, the Senate has also called for the prosecution of the DSS officials, and they want it also to be investigated. How is this going to work out? Should the investigation be that of the office of the AGF, or should it be that of the Senate? Should the Senate hands off?
Well, we must understand it from this context, that what the Senate is doing is also within its powers. Now, the Senate will not be asking the Attorney General to carry out the investigation, the Senate will be asking the police to carry out the investigation. In other words, a separate and distinct institution to carry out the investigation. Mind you, taking over a matter is within the purview of the Attorney General's powers. The law is very clear and out on this. He can go as far as, for instance, if after reviewing the file, he discovers that this is a matter that should not have been filed in the first place, he is vested with the power to enter in law what we call a nolle prosecute, meaning he will decide that the matter should no longer be prosecuted if he discovers that it shouldn't have been filed in the first place. Now, there's a decided decision of the Supreme Court, Federal Republic of Nigeria against Sowore, where the Supreme Court said that prosecutorial agencies of government are vested with the power to prosecute, including the police in all courts, particularly the police. But by and large, that it is not foreclosed, but that the Attorney General is also recognized as the supervising authority by virtue of the fact that he is vested with the power to take over, discontinue, or to institute an action, and is also vested with the power to engage private prosecutors. Now that the Senate has intervened and has seen what transpired in court as an embarrassment to our justice sector system and has ordered that it be investigated, the Attorney General's office will not investigate. The Attorney General's office is also looking into it. So there are two separate and distinct arms of government investigating another arm of government that has been traumatized, that has been insulted, and that the justice in the judiciary is actually being shackled. And that's the essence of the intervention of the National Assembly, that if anyone is found culpable, such a person will also be prosecuted. But the question then is...
Now, some people believe that the taking over of this case by the AGF, Mr. Malami, is a belated move. Do you agree with that view?
So, first and foremost, let us understand it from this context. The Attorney General's office, by and large, actually instituted the action for and on behalf of the federal government, but gave the brief to a private prosecutor by the name of Dr. Hassan Liman, SAN, to prosecute for and on behalf of the federal government. Now that it has gone wrong, now that this has happened, and the government feels embarrassed, I want to believe so, the government has now stepped in. If you recall that the Attorney General paid a visit to the Chief Judge of the Federal High Court, and from what I read in the papers, there was also some apology and some meeting also with the judge saddled with the case for the purpose of apologizing to the person of the judge. Now, the Attorney General has stepped in to simply say, look, I have been mandated to look into this matter, and in looking into this matter, I need to record the file. Perhaps there's some clash of interest. Perhaps maybe this is evidence of lack of confidence in the prosecutorial team, and the Attorney General wants to take the matter over with a view to looking into it and see what must have happened that led to operatives of the DSS invading the court while the court was still in session, and that's an embarrassment.
Okay, Mr. Quakers, let me get your views on this. Mr. Anumudu, you are a lawyer, and you've heard the position of the CJN saying further that even perhaps we needed a committee to be set up to interface with the executive on this very disturbing situation that the judiciary has found itself in. What do you make of it? He also said that the judges, as well as the law profession as a whole, the judiciary, are shooting themselves somewhat in the foot. Is that what's happening in your sector?
I'm happy that the CJN has put it out there in the public that the judiciary is facing a lot of intimidation. And that's my concern, because I'm aware of very senior, qualified, competent lawyers who have politely turned down appointments to the bench because of not willing to be subjected to this kind of intimidation. And if you know how hard these judges work to dispense justice, which is not open to the eyes of the ordinary man on the street. They work even at night when other civil servants are sleeping just to deliver judgment. These huge sacrifices they make demand commendation, not the kind of embarrassment and insult that we are seeing in the country right now. And so the CJN statement is a confirmation of what we all know, that the judiciary is passing through unwarranted, unjustified intimidation that must be stopped immediately. I had called for the arrest of the DSS officials that invaded the homes of judges at night in 2016. I repeatedly made that call because once impunity is not punished, it will repeat itself. I said it then because the officers who did that operation claimed they were acting from orders from above. At that time, the president was away in Germany and couldn't have given the order. The vice president, who was met in church on Sunday after the midnight operation of Friday night, was asked about what happened, and he said he didn't know what happened, and he was waiting to be briefed on Monday, which means that operation was neither authorized by the president nor the vice president. So who then authorized such high-level embarrassment and intimidation of judicial officers who eventually turned out to be innocent? From the Supreme Court down to the Federal High Court, down to State High Court, judges' homes were broken at midnight and they were hounded like common criminals. And the officers who did that have not been brought to book as we speak. So that must not repeat itself here now. Whoever authorized the invasion of the Federal High Court Abuja that went into the judge's courtroom while the court was still sitting to seek to abduct and embarrass a judge who had to scamper to safety. No, these officers must be specifically isolated and the full weight of the law visited on them. That is one way to stop this intimidation. And that is the role the judiciary needs to play.
Let me now switch this because of lack of time. Let me just switch this over to Mr. Quakers. Mr. Quakers, what must be done to correct this persistent invasion? If you do remember, some people have argued that this is all happening as a result of the neglect to the rule of law by some persons within the judiciary. Cases like the former National Security Advisor have been mentioned. Also, the El Zegzaki case have been mentioned as a flagrant disobedience to the rule of law. Is this also stemming from that?
Well, let me say this. For me, I have always consistently maintained that the judiciary must assert its independence. But the question is, how does it assert its independence? I mean, I listened to the Chief Justice of Nigeria and also the President of the Bar. Now, clearly, there must be sanctions for bad behavior. I recall many years ago, the late Justice, Honorable Justice Jega, who used to sit in Ilorin, had an issue with the executive and his orderlies were withdrawn from him. And he chose not to sit. He said until his orderlies were restored, the Nigerian Bar Association, Ilorin branch, stood solidly behind him and his orderlies were restored. We must not go cap in hand begging the executive. I've always said, when you look at the Constitution, it appears that everything that we have been taught in our various law faculties and also the Nigerian Law School appears to be academic. There is independence of the judiciary as enshrined in the Constitution. The executive is not above the legislature, neither is the judiciary above the executive. They are mutually independent. I mean, the law on this is very clear. You just need to have one or two persons that will say, no, we're not going to take this, and put their foot down. Now, if the judiciary decides that, look, if you disobey lawful orders of court, we will not sit until these orders are obeyed. But you come across as being helpless when an order is made and is not enforced. Yes, it is agreed. The enforcement of laws are based on or saddled with the executive. It is the executive's responsibility to execute and enforce. It is judicial place to interpret, while the legislature is empowered to make laws. Now, so you can see that these three organs of government are independent from each other. Are you aware, for instance?
Let me just get your views on this just before you go. Whose head should roll in this instance? Is it those who gave the order for the DSS officers to invade the court, or should it be the officers who invaded the court themselves?
Both the officers who invaded the court themselves and the person saddled with the responsibility to oversee them. Are you aware, for instance, in Rivers State, a commissioner for whether lands and housing resigned his commissionership because an approval was given by his office and it led to a building collapse that occasioned death. On account of that, he resigned. So whoever is saddled with the responsibility to oversee, for instance, the DG of DSS should resign. It should be sanctioned. Okay. These men didn't go out on their own to carry out their duty. They were carried out in court, orders given to them by superiors. So if this has happened and the judiciary has been embarrassed with this conduct, the government has also been embarrassed with this conduct, somebody should be sanctioned.
That's a good place to let it rest. I most sincerely thank you, Mr. Norris Quakers, a senior advocate of Nigeria. That's your constituency when you all met as members of the benches in the country, in Abuja, the body of benches, of course, in Abuja. Many thanks indeed for sharing your thoughts with us. You believe that those two, the perpetrators of the action and the person who gave the order, should be the ones whose heads should roll. As well as Isaac Numadu in our Abuja studios. Been a little while, you've been off the radar, but you're welcome back, I must say. Many thanks indeed for talking to us here on State of the Nation. And to everyone who's been watching, this is State of the Nation. I'm Gimbo.